Johnson and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Well, just as an experiment, these are the original chipmunk wheels and they're just foam tyres with a plastic centre, and they're very, very light, really, really light. As you'll have seen in the other video, we made some nice wheels and tyres that were quite scale for the competition. And a little bit of feedback from those. They held up very well. They looked great on the table because they squashed right down nicely, just like the full size. The only trouble was, on landing, the air was forced out of the tyre, and by the end of the weekend, they looked flat. When it rolled along the ground, they looked flat, and the hub moved within the tyre as if it was flat. So you need to release the hub, let air back in, seal it back up again, and that would work. So what I thought I'd do is I'd just have a look at the original chipmunk wheels, see if we could do something similar to what we did on the scale ones, but using these really lightweight and slightly more durable ones, and then I can put these on the model for when it's just, flying about the place, general weekend flying practice. So I've had a look at it, and it looks like this wheel has been made in two parts, then glued together, probably straight onto the tyre. So to get the two parts of the wheel apart, it's not as easy as the metal ones we were looking at, where it was just 3 screws. This one, I think I'm going to Dremel away the middle, leave the hub, but just around the outside of that, I'm going to Dremel and see if this disc will come off, and then see if we can replace that disc with that. That's the plan. The tyre is actually glued to the centre. So I'm just reaching in and breaking the glue joint where I can. With a bit of luck, following wind, there we go. So there's, and as we surmised, the two parts slide together and then they were glued. So what I intend to do is clean up that edge and then clean the back of this and make the size of that same size as that, and hopefully I can join the two together. That's the plan. Anyway, just going to use a drum sander. So I'm going to use some medium zap for this next bit. You can see what I've done to the wheel, taking it flush with the half side so that we've got enough room to lay this on top. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to put a little bit of medium zap around the tyre, where the tyre will sit, and then I'm going to push that onto there, like that. I'm going to do medium zap around the centre of that. I line, let's put some on the tyre, shall we? Just to make sure. Then we align it over that and squash the two halves together. Now that's not going off, so what I need is my zap. and that has not glued it at all. I think I've potentially made that too shallow, so it's pushing it too far. So what we'll do is put a block of wood under there to stop me trying to compress the tyre, and have another go. This time I'm going to use thin zap, see if that works any better. Right, I've got my zap kicker. Squash the two together. Thin zap in the middle there. Really, I'd prefer it to go off without any assistance. That might be asking too much. Yeah, it seems to have held. Now whether that's going to be strong enough to withstand landing loads, I'm not sure. And then the axle will simply be a bolt like that. It runs actually true. Amazing. So there we go. I'm going to put some little nuts on there. There should be bolts there, and they're missing from the moulding. I don't know what's happened. I must have made this mould before I put the nuts on. Anyway, so I'll just add some hex bar or something, or even some real nuts, who knows. And then maybe spray a bit of silver on it or something like that, and I'll show you the finished item. But it was just an interesting exercise. Whether or not they'll be strong enough, whether the hubs will let go, I don't know. But I'll let you know. So I just wanted to quickly show you how the wheel was actually mounted on the oleo, because I hadn't made it very clear in the previous video. And these foam tyres are mounted in exactly the same way. So as you can see, the bolt passes through the wheel. I put a collet on the other side of the bolt and the wheel, just so that I could set the play in the wheel and fix it. It also adds has the additional benefit of spacing the wheel away from the oleo, because when it compresses, you don't want the wheel to touch the shroud. So this just holds it away from there. The threaded part of the screw then goes through the oleo and is clamped in place by the grub screw at the top. And that's all, and that's enough. And then once you're happy with the lengths and everything else, then you can just cut off the excess threaded section there. So there you go, that's how they're mounted onto the oleo. Okay, carrying on with adding a little bit more detail to my chipmunk, I thought I'd take a look at the tail wheel, and it was a horrendous looking thing, as I think I've shown in several of the videos, and I did sort of say if we could find a better way to do the tail wheel, then we would. Anyway, I'm going to make a bit of an attempt. So what I've done is I've just taken some piano wire, quite a good piano wire, a fairly thick piano wire, and I've made a hoop. Now the hoop is just big enough to go around with the tyre without contacting the tyre, and the radius is the same as the tyre. You'll see on the real Chipmunk the tyre is actually flat, but I'm going to leave it round just for the sake of this. So what I intend to do is to take that hoop, add some tubing to the end and flatten it so that I can pass a screw through right the way through. I'll probably need a piece of tubing in there to shim it out a bit. Okay, so I need 2 pieces of tubing that I'll solder to this tube, and then flatten and then drill. On this bit I'm going to add an arm. Now this has got to be really strong, and I've never tried this before, so we'll just have to see how it goes, but I'm going to silver solder those two together and see if we get a strong enough joint that actually will hold together. That opens up all sorts of avenues for me in the future of ways of doing things, so we'll see if this works. It'll be very good if it does. I'll probably have to put a 45-degree bend in that upwards because the tail wheel actually casters back, so we'll put a bend in that probably first. It doesn't really matter when I do it. In fact, it's going to be easier to silver solder if I don't put the bend in it, so I might add the bend afterwards. I'll also add the brass tubing on the ends afterwards because I don't want the solder from heating this to soften the solder holding them on. This will just be soft soldered. Okay, so that's the plan. These 2 pieces of plate have been incredibly useful. A little bit of this paste. Tiny bit of water. There we go. I'm just going to put some on there. Try and get some underneath. Which I think I've done. So I'm going to use some Easy Flow number 2 stainless there we go. As easy as that. Amazing, isn't it? I really wish I'd discovered silver soldering a few years ago. Now we'll let that cool down and then we'll see what we've got. Well, it should have cooled down by now. Indeed it has. So, it looks pretty good, both sides. Looks very good. So I'm just going to see if I can find something to clean that up. It's never good to leave the flux on the surface of the metal because it can cause corrosion. I've never seen it, but you know, that's what everybody says. Clean the joint afterwards. So that's what I'll do. Besides, it looks nicer if you have a nice clean joint. Let's just check the wheel still fits inside. It does. It does nicely, in fact. Let's get a needle file. There we go. I think you'll agree that's much better. Now, provided it's strong, So now let's make a bit more space. I'm just going to cut about a 1 centimetre length off the end of the this tubing. Now I've shown you this way of cutting tubing before. It knackers the scalpel, but works very well. So I need 2 lengths, similar length. Oops, I'm wandering off there. Doesn't cut so well if you do a spiral. And that's what's happened, you see, because it was doing a spiral, it's messed it up a little bit. So I just tidy that up a little bit. Not that it matters. What we're going to do is push these onto the ends of these, like that. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to squash these now, so that they only need to be like that. I'm actually going to squash them a little bit deeper. I mean sliding them off the bar a little bit to there. So hopefully you can see what I've done. I've just simply squashed them. Now what I want to do is make 2 small holes in there for the screws. Then I'll use the screws to keep the thing in alignment while we solder it. I have a long M2. I think that would be perfect. So I'm just going to use pin drill, centre punching first because the drill is wandering. And we'll do the other one at the same time. With a piece of piano wire through the end. There we go. That was a lot harder than I was expecting. Screw won't go through there quite. Very close there. Almost wondering whether it's worth cutting a thread. Then I don't need to use a nut and bolt. Let's see what I've got. That's the right size. Let's see if that'll actually cut a thread through there. Yes, that is cutting a thread. So let's put it back in there so I can hold it. And there we go, the thread is cut. Bit of a brutal way of doing it, but it works. Now, do the same on the other one. And use them just to hold this in position. I'm going to use the blow lamp, but I'm going to soft solder. You can already see that that's not flowing. So what we did last time we had this issue was I used some of this Powercraft flux for soft soldering. clearly still hot enough that it's causing the flux to bubble. So now we put some flux on there. Let's see if this helps. So I've put all of that into practice. You know, I've just shown you how I've done all that. I've cleaned up the soldering, and I had to thin the tubing on the side there. I also had to put an aluminium sleeve through the wheel, just to take up the slack, because the original axle was too big. It's a bit floppy and a bit loose, but I think I'm quite happy with that. What I did was I threaded this end of the brass for the screw, the M2 screw. This end I made bigger so that the bolt would pass straight through, and that's nice and solid now. So what I need to do now is just take a look at what sort of angle I need and where I put the bend in this piano wire here. So what we've got here is my old fuselage from my old yellow Chipmunk that crashed, and I'm using it as a test bed for what I'm going to do with the tail wheel. So I cut it off, obviously, and there was a big coil spring just here, and then there was a long arm to the wheel. So I've cut that off, and what I'm doing is I'm going to fit 2 collets just to make doubly sure. And what I've done to the 2 collets is I've elongated the hole. So when you can actually put both wires from the wheel, from the new tail wheel. In fact, I'm going to do it one at a time, I think. No, this is a trial, and I can see I can't do both. I have to do them both together. So what happens is, I'm not sure if you can actually see what's going on here, but one tail wheel is going through, struggling to go through the second collet. I'm not sure why. It was an adequate size. This one here, it's struggling to go through. But it is actually through, so that's good. So if we line the rudder up, and it should be something like that, then push the 2 collets together, tighten that one, make sure the wheel is where we want it, which it isn't, like that. Tighten that one up. That should be good on its own, but just to make sure, we tighten the other one up as well. Okay, and we've got 2 collets. The job of the collets are actually to keep the rudder post height up against this nylon block. So when you can see that, all I'll do is I'll go in with a slitting disc and cut off this extra shaft. And then we've got a steerable tail wheel, and I'll build some frame around here to sort of beef it up. There should be a frame that comes to there. It won't look perfect, but you know, it'll be much better than that horrible coil spring affair that we did have. Well, this actually is a quite scary bit, so now I'm going to cut the tail wheel off spinach. First of all, let's get rid of this tail wheel, or the collet. Now we have to cut this right on that spring. Which is there. Very meaty pair of cutters needed. Now what I'll do is I want to swap that collet there. Before I fit those, I want to just put a little mark on the piano wire there so I know where that collet should sit. And that one comes off. You see it doesn't move up and down as it did on the yellow one because there is actually a rudder on this one, and that is connected directly to the rudder. So here's our funky collets with the elongated hole. That should drop down through both of them. Yep. And then we need to try and keep the tail wheel straight. The rudder straight for a start might help. Tighten both collets up as far as I dare. And I think you'll agree, that's a much better tail wheel setup than we had. Now to make it a little bit more authentic, I may run a beam up to here, because it should have a sort of, it's actually a very similar section to this but runs the other way, and it might be possible for me to actually salvage the piece out of the yellow one and actually just fit it to there, make it appear as if it's part of it. And I did modify the old nylon section somewhat, made it a slightly different shape, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot closer than that horrible coil spring tail wheel was. So there we go. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video and you've picked up a few tips along the way. If you'd like to click like and subscribe to the channel, that would be much appreciated.